And I've been able to connect with people like never before. Like people who now live in Miami or live in Israel or live in other parts of the world. I'm now able to connect with them through this Corona era. I have no commute to work anymore. You know, I just this morning I spent a lot of time with my kids, learning with them instead of taking them to the bus. So there's a lot of good things and positive things that have come out of this Corona era. And we're thankful for that. We have to look always at the positive. So today's shiur.
Riel, can I ask you, please, if you can record it?
Oh, recorded. Yes, I recorded.
Record it.
Yes, I just started recording, so we could. Yes. So let's just start off with a little bit of light humor related to our topic today. So this farmer was giving this tourist a ride, and this farmer had all these farm animals in his truck. So he was going, he had sheep and he had goats and he had some pigs, he had everything there. And in the middle, the farmer was conversation with this tourist, so he didn't notice a car and he got into a accident and the animals spilled all over the road. So this tourist had his limbs broken. He was shattered. He was in a very bad state. And the farmer himself was injured. But the farmer comes out and he sees that his sheep all have broken limbs and everything. So he looks at them and he says, man, these sheep are worthless. He takes out his shotgun and he shoots them all. And then he looks at the chickens and he sees the chickens are immobile. They can't move. So he takes out his shotgun and he shoots all the chickens. Dead. Boom. They're worthless. He says, I can't sell them anywhere. And then he looks at the pigs, and the pigs are also barely moving, barely functioning. They're bleeding all over the place. He says, man, who's going to buy these things, man? So he takes his gun again, and he shoots them all. And then the tourist, who's there bleeding and in pain, ribs broken, the farmer asks him, tell me, man, how you doing, China? So the tourist says, I've never been better before in my life. So today, we're going to discuss broken limbs, broken bones, and all this kind of thing. I'm going to share my screen just for a moment because I want you to read from the Parsha just to make it a little bit easier. I know that it's going to look a little bit worse for the actual screen, but I'll unshare it very soon afterwards. Okay, so let me just get you to the Parsha, which you can all see in front of you right now. Okay, so let's read from the Parsha of the week. So it says like this. By the way, this Parsha, whenever I read Parshat Emor, I used to have a classmate, Olav Shalom Asher Elimelech, and his father, Mr. Elimelech, I forget his first name, he used to daven in Orange Grove Shul all the time. His father, what was his name?
Shlomo
Elimelech. So I remember this Parsha Emor. When I got my bar mitzvah, obviously my father told me that I'm now a professional laner. So I used to learn how to lane in Orange Grove Hebrew congregation. And I remember this parasha, I read the whole thing right when I was 13. It was right then. And Mr. Elimelech comes over to me and says, you become a professional. So whenever I read Parshat Emor, I remember Mr. Elimelech sitting in the back of the shul next to Mr. Mizansky and Mr. Fullerevitz. I see them all. So anyway, it says like this. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, the Lord spoke to Moses saying, Daber el Aaron lemor, speak to Aharon saying, Ish mizaracha ledorotam. And you can look at the English, you have the English right there, you don't need me to translate. Asher yeh bo mum lo yikrav la'akriv lechem elokav. Any man who has any kind of defect shall not offer up a service to God. In other words, we're talking about Kohanim. A Kohen who is considered exalted, who's considered special, he gets the first honor always, and he's the person who represents chesed, represents kindness. He's the one who's supposed to bless Am Yisrael. So it says, if you have a Kohen who's blemished, this guy who's blemished cannot serve in the service of Hashem. Lechem Elokav, Rashi says of you, I'm reading it, Ma'achal Elokav, God's food. So he cannot offer any sacrifice. And it says in verse 18, Ki kol ish asher bo mum lo yikrav. Any man who has a defect should not approach. Ish iver, what is considered a defect? A blind man. By the way, a blind man, the Torah considers as if he's God forbid, a dead man. Or piseach, or he's lame. Or charum, or sarua, the Torah translates of their sunken nose, or mismatching limbs. And I'm not going to read the Rashi over here. You could all see it in front of you. And then continues verse 19. O ish, Asher yeh bo shever ragel or shever yad, or a man who has a broken leg or a broken arm. So think about this. You have a Kohen who's considered the holiest person, who is supposed to perform the holiest task, to offer, if he's a Kohen Gadol, incense, or to offer all different things. And if he's got a broken hand, if he played rugby, or if he played cricket and he broke his hand or he broke his leg, I'm sorry, he cannot serve God any longer until he's healed, by the way. Or giben or dak, one with long eyebrows, or a cataract, or tevalul be'eno, or garav or yalefet, or meruach ashek. The translation is in front of you. All these things are considered blemishes, and you cannot serve God. I'm going to scroll down to verse 21. Kol ish asher bo mum mizer Aaron HaKohen, any man among Aharon the Kohen's offspring, lo yigash la'akriv et ishe Hashem, he shall not offer up the sacrifices of God. Et lechem okav lo yigash la'akriv. Now, Rashi says something fascinating. Hey, look at verse 21, the bottom of here. Rashi says, Kol ish asher bo mum lerabot shar mumin. Says that the Rashi, don't think that we're talking about only a defect in your hand or your leg or the eye or your eyebrows, the ones that I mentioned. Any kind of blemish. If you have any kind of blemish, you cannot offer a sacrifice to God. Says Rashi Mumbo, the next Rashi, there's a defect in him. I'll read it in English. As long as he has the defect, he's unfit for the holy service. However, if his defect goes away, he's fit to serve. So at least we have like some sort of consolation, you know. If the guy broke his hand and this poor Kohen was no longer able to serve, he had to wait a couple of weeks, you know, for the doctors to heal his hand, heal his leg. Once it was healed, he could now serve again. By the way, it also goes for, you know, when Mashiach comes, we know that everybody who's sick, who's ill, will be healed. So let's say you have a Kohen now who's blind, God forbid, but when Mashiach comes, he's going to be healed and he won't be blind anymore. So he will be able to serve as a Kohen again. Now, what's interesting is verse 22 says, you know, just in case you think that I'm discriminating against him, lechem elokav mikochei hakodoshim umin hakodoshim yochel, he's able to eat God's food. In other words, a specific food called Torah, and Rashi says v'ya'elu kochei hakodoshim, certain degree of food that he's allowed to eat, even though he's blemished and cannot serve and perform. Okay, verse 23, achel haparochet lo yavo, he shall not come to the dividing curtain. So for he has a defect, and he shall not desecrate my holy things, for I am the Lord who sanctifies them. That is a tremendous, I'm going to stop sharing the screen just so we could all see each other. Tremendous question here, which really, really doesn't make sense. I mean, are we pro-discrimination? Isn't this absolute discrimination against the poor Kohen? I mean, aren't we Jews who fight for the rights of all? You know, if you're in America and you go to a place which doesn't have a handicapped elevator, you know that you could sue the city. It's like winning a jackpot. You go to a restaurant and there's no way for a handicapped person to enter the restaurant. That's the jackpot. You can now sue that restaurant. It's illegal. So in New York, this is the law. Right? Subway stations have all elevators. Everywhere there's an elevator. And what does the Torah say? I'm sorry, Mr. Kohen. We love you. But if you broke your hand, you cannot serve. If you're blind, if you have a defect with your eyebrows or any other defects, I'm sorry. What? How does that even make sense? You know, the Rebbe taught us to look positively at every single human being. No matter who, no matter what, we always look positively at every single human being. There was once an individual who wrote to the Rebbe, and he said, I was in a minyan in some faraway town, in the hick town somewhere, I don't even know where it was, and there was a minyan of exactly 10 men over there, and one of the men walked into the minyan, and he was reading a newspaper, and he read the newspaper the whole time. He wasn't even davening. I'm very, very, very upset. Wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe, who taught us to value each individual, who taught us not to discriminate against each individual, the Rebbe taught us, the Rebbe said, you know, why don't you look at it the other way around? This individual is so far removed from Yiddishkeit. He doesn't even know how to daven. He was never taught how to pray. And nonetheless, he's coming to shul, and he's joining the minyan, and he's making the minyan. Why don't you look at it that way? Instead of looking at a person who's reading a newspaper during davening, read further, deeper into it. This person could do anything else in the world now, and he's nevertheless coming to shul while he's still reading a newspaper. That's amazing. The Rebbe taught us to love every single Jew, no matter who, no matter what. I'm sure you guys heard that the Chabad rabbi in Hanover, Germany, just passed away, Rahman al-Itzlan, from the coronavirus. On the 11th day of Nisan, he was in Israel. And, some people told him, stay in Israel, it's safer there. And he said, listen, I'm a shaliach, I'm an emissary of the Rebbe in Hanover, Germany. And I need to go back to Hanover, Germany. I can't stay here. So he went back and he actually contracted the coronavirus in the airport in Israel on the way. And from the 11th day of Nisan till last Saturday night, last Shabbat, basically 8 days ago, he actually passed away. His wife and his kids devastated, 8 children, the oldest is 19, the youngest, 8 children, and truly tragic. By the way, the coronavirus doesn't just come to old people with a compromised immune system. I mean, as far as I know, he was a perfectly healthy human being. But here's the reason why I'm telling the story is as follows. The wife, Sterner Wolf, so the family, as soon as Benny Wolf died, they thought he wants to be buried in Israel. They were sure he would want to be buried in Israel. I mean, who wouldn't want to be buried in Israel? There's so many reasons why a person would want to be buried to Israel, from Tchiyat HaMetim to everything. So she shocked the family and she said, well, I actually want him to be buried in Hanover in Germany. And they're like, what? She says, the Rebbe sent us on a mission to help every single Jew in Germany, in Hanover, and our mission hasn't ended. And so we want to bury him here. And he's the first Chabad rabbi in 75 years to be buried in Hanover, Germany, because the last time somebody was buried there was in Germany in the war. And not only that, but she decided she's now going to assume full responsibilities, a full mantle of leadership to become now the new Rabbi Rebbetzin team is going to be her. And she said, I'm now going to lead the Jewish community in Hanover, just like my husband did. And by the way, the worldwide community raised $1 million for her, or €1 million, I think. I don't know. I think euros even more than dollars. They raised €1 million. People from all over the world were so inspired by her story that they gave money so that she can continue the work and legacy of her husband. By the way, the story shows so many things, but one of the things the story shows is that, first of all, we don't discriminate against women, and I'm going to talk more about this in a minute, because if you look at every Chabad website, it's the co-director. The rabbi and Rebbetzin are co-directors. It's not that we discriminate against women, against men. Everybody does it together. Here, she now is assuming the mantle of leadership. But where does she get that inspiration? Where does she get that strength that her husband hasn't even been buried? She's an onen. She's patur from all mitzvot of the Torah. Where does she get that stamina, that strength to say, I am now going to stay here and my husband's going to be buried in Hanover, Germany? She get that strength from the Rebbe who taught us to love every single Jew, no matter who, no matter what, no matter when, no matter how. And we do not discriminate against every Jew. We love every single Jew equally. So that gives us, that strengthens the question. So we just read in the Torah from this week's Parsha that we discriminate against Kohanim, the poor Kohen. Yeah, hello, I'm injured. Nope, you cannot serve. You know, the Kohen was something that every single person wanted to serve God as the Kohen. It would be a dream come true of every single person. You have to serve as a Kohen. I mean, it's like a dream. You know, if you weren't chosen for that duty, it would be like, okay, fine. You know, the Kohen gets first aliyah, gets everything. But if you're injured, I'm sorry, you can no longer serve. By the way, the Kohen Gadol, as we read, also another thing about him, he has to have a wife. By the way, he has to be married. If he's not married, he's considered not mushlam. He's not perfect, and he cannot serve. He cannot serve. Okay, so far so good. Hard to get feedback on Zoom, but I'm just going to continue and assume everybody's here with me. From the few faces that I see, I could see that everybody's here. That's great. Okay. So the answer to this question will be understood as follows. Just with a little story, I'll explain it. You know, Steve Jobs, one of the greatest inventors of our generation, as we all know, he invented the iPhone, Apple, CEO of Apple. So Steve Jobs, I'm sure you all know this, but Steve Jobs was adopted. his father died or left his mother when she was pregnant, and his mother couldn't handle it, so she gave birth, and he was adopted. He was adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Jobs, right? His original name wasn't Steve Jobs. That's not his biological name. So Steve Jobs was adopted, and one time when he was 7 years old, he got very, very upset, extremely frustrated, because one of his friends, when he was discussing his adoption, which his parents told him he was adopted, so one of his friends, a girl in the class, said to him, "So you know what? Your parents didn't want you. Your original parents didn't want you. They abandoned you." And he was very, 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 very upset about this. And so he went over to his mother, Mrs. Jobs, and he asked her, "Am I not wanted?" And his mother and his father, who was there, looked him in the eye, and they told him one of the most powerful statements, a statement which he testifies, changed my life. They looked him in the eye and they said, "We specifically chose you. You were chosen. It's not that you were abandoned. We chose you." And he told himself, his whole life, he told himself, "We specifically chose you." And with this story in mind, we can understand the Parsha and what it means. You see, what does it mean, holy? What is holy? You know, we have zero connection to God, right? If I want to talk to a person, I can WhatsApp him or her, I can Instagram him, I can Facebook him, there's so many tools now. WhatsApp just came up with my favorite tool of all. You can actually video chat not with 4 people, but with 8 people. This is going to be a life changer for me personally. I prefer the WhatsApp method. But if I want to Zoom in the Corona era, I can Zoom with people. Just imagine, I'm Zooming now with, it says 31 participants all over the world. I'm in New York, you guys are in Joburg, my favorite place, and we're Zooming together. But if I want to communicate with God, it's impossible, because I don't have a way of connecting with him. God doesn't have Zoom, as far as I know. He doesn't have Instagram, he doesn't have Facebook, he doesn't have any method that I can communicate with him. So how in the world am I supposed to communicate with God? The answer is God tells you how to communicate with him. God says, if you do this, specifically this, if you blow the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, you will communicate with me. If you light Shabbat candles on Friday afternoon, you will communicate with me. If you put on tefillin every single morning, if you pray, you will communicate with me. So God defines and tells us how to connect with him. God tells us how to be holy. As we read in the Parsha last week, Ki Kadoshim to you, you should be holy, Ki Kadosh Ani. So God gives us the method, the ability, the way to communicate with him. It kind of like he extends his hand. But here's the trick. We have to do it exactly the way he says it. So for example, if you blow the shofar today, so blowing the shofar in and of itself is not a mitzvah. So if I blow the shofar today, it's wonderful, but I'm accomplishing absolutely nothing. If I shake the lulav today, I'm doing nothing. On Pesach, if I eat the matzah, it's the greatest mitzvah. It's a beautiful, unbelievable mitzvah. But if I eat matzah today, it's nothing. If I eat matzah Friday, it's Pesach Sheni. That's great. That's what I need to do. But if I eat matzah today, it's worthless. In other words, there's no intrinsic and basic value to the mitzvah itself. The mitzvah is to do what God wants. By the way, that's also the idea of we don't discriminate against women, right? Women don't put on tefillin, they don't put on a talis, and they don't have many of the mitzvot that men do. It's not that we're discriminating against women. It's that women were chosen for a different task. Women were chosen for a different mission. It's not that the tefillin are holy. It's the man putting on the tefillin is holy. But the woman lighting Shabbat candles, that's holy. The woman doing her mitzvot, that's holy. So every mitzvah, it needs to be exactly in the right time. The point is this: holiness is what God decides. And just to expand on this theme a little bit, to understand it a little better, I'm going to tell a story. Once upon a time, there were 2 brothers. One brother was Reb Zusha from Anapoli, and another one was Elimelech Milizhensk. And these 2 brothers went around all Russia and Eastern Europe, inspiring people, telling people to serve God more with joy and vigor. Anyway, one time they were thrown into jail. It was a misunderstanding. They were thrown into jail. And in jail, they were there in a cell with a couple of criminals. And there was a pail of dirt, of garbage, the toilet was there in the middle. So Reb Zusha says looks at the pail, he shows Elimelech, and he says, we can't pray anymore. We can't do the Ma'ariv of the evening prayers. So Elimelech looks at Zusha and he says, listen, the same God who commanded us to pray Ma'ariv is the same God who tells us that we can't do Ma'ariv now because there's a pail or the toilet stink mess right up here now. So we can't pray. So they start dancing for joy, and they dance and they dance and they dance, and they say, now, till now, we served God by davening Ma'ariv. But now we're serving God by not praying. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's the same God. So anyway, the prisoners saw the commotion. They see everybody dancing with joy. And they asked one of the prisoners, why are these two crazy Hasidic people dancing? And they said, well, it's something to do with that pail of toilet. So the God said, they dancing, they like that. We'll take it out. So they took it out, and Reb Zusha and Elimelech were able to daven Ma'ariv properly now. But the point is this: we're now sitting in isolation, Corona, and normally, what does God deem holy? Normally, the Shekhinah is in the shul. It's still in the shul, don't get me wrong, it's still in the shul. But the same God who told us to pray in the shul, the same God who told us that it's holy to pray in the shul, is the same God who tells us, make the shul into your home. Now, once upon a time, 2,000 years ago, we served God in the temple. We sacrificed every single day in the temple with the Kohanim. But today, the temple is destroyed, so we don't serve God like that. By the way, once upon a time, we had 248 positive mitzvot. Now, we only have 87 positive mitzvot. We can't do the rest of the 248. We're only able to do 87 because most of those mitzvot are to do with the temple. So we're not able to do them. So now, we have 87 mitzvot. The same God who told us once upon a time to serve in the temple told us to serve in shuls. Now that same God says, no, you can't serve God in shuls, serve God in your home. Make the mishkan, make the home for God in your personal home. So it's the idea is, it's the same God all the time telling us what the definition of holiness is. God is the one who decides what it means to be holy. By the way, eating pork is obviously an avera, is obviously a sin, but if you eat pork to save your life, then eating pork becomes a mitzvah, right? The Jews in the Holocaust who weren't able to eat anything, but they trade for meat, for example, becomes a mitzvah because you're saving your life. So again, it's not to do with the item, it's to do with God. The way God defines it is the mitzvah. Actually, the Rebbe gave a talk in it was about in the 1950s, 1960s. I don't remember when exactly. It was actually the first time my wife's grandfather was a prominent student of the Rebbe. His name was Zalman Jaffe. So there were 3 Jews on that Shabbat who had just escaped Russia, and they were very upset that in Russia they weren't able to do most of these 87 mitzvot. As we all know, these 87 mitzvot in Russia, they forbade them to do, right? They forbade Jews to do a bris. They forbade Jews they closed down all the shuls, all the mikvahs. If you weren't allowed to teach your children Torah. So most of these 87 mitzvot, you had to have self-sacrifice to do. And even then it was very, 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 very difficult. So these Jews came out of Russia, and the Rebbe wanted to inspire them. The Rebbe wanted to give them inspiration. And this inspiration is to do the same idea in the Corona era that we are now. So the Rebbe told them, first of all, we don't know why God did this. We have no idea. Anybody who says, I read all the time, I see rabbis in Israel, why is God bringing this Corona epidemic because of X, Y, and Z? Nobody knows. Nobody knows the truth. We can think, but nobody knows why God did it. What we do know is that God loves us like we love our child. Just like you love your child, you will never harm your child. You'll never hurt your child. So too, God loves us like we are an only child. But we don't know why God did this. So the Rebbe said like this, maybe, and again, maybe, when Jews were in Russia and they didn't have the ability to perform mitzvot, so now when they come out of Russia, they will have missed it. They will have missed davening with the minyan. They will have missed being inspired by putting on tefillin, by going to mikveh, by keeping kosher. So now when they come out of Russia, they will serve God with such vigor and such joy and such enthusiasm like never before. And perhaps the same thing can be said about the Corona era. Again, God forbid to say this is the reason why we have it. We have no idea. But I can assure you this, that once Orange Grove Hebrew congregation will be open again, God willing, the shul will be packed and everybody will come and say, wow, I missed shul so much because I wasn't able to do it. The president will be busy. The treasurer will be busy. Everybody will come and be inspired and say, hey, I miss putting on tefillin. The rabbi won't have to call anybody to say, I need a minyan, mincha ma'ariv. What do you mean I need a minyan? I have 100 people in shul. Because everybody will be there inspired because they missed it. Can you imagine the Monday afternoon class back in that Orange Grove Hebrew congregation? Max, you're going to have to buy so much food for that. It's going to be crazy. You're going to have to find more sponsors for the food because everybody will have missed it so much that it will be a different kind of thing. So perhaps that's the reason why it is to make us appreciate it. So the answer to the Kohen dilemma is that, God forbid, we're not discriminating against Kohanim. God forbid, we don't discriminate against anybody. Jews were the first people to fight apartheid because we don't discriminate against anyone. But the answer is, asking why a Kohen who's blemished cannot serve in the temple is like asking why I'm discriminating against all the women in the world by not marrying them. What do you mean, why am I not marrying somebody who's not my wife? My wife is my wife, and I'm not discriminating against every other woman in the world by not marrying them. I mean, I love them. Actually, I hope I don't, but I like them. I appreciate them as human beings, but I love my wife. My wife is my wife. So it's like asking, why don't I marry any other woman? By the way, last night I gave a whole lecture to my community here in Manhattan about love and the secret of love and relationships. So just that point of the reason why you love your wife is because she's yours. So, I told my community last night, I actually Googled, what is the meaning of the word love? I wanted to know what Google would say. Rabbi Google knows everything. So Rabbi Google, what's the meaning of the word love? So Rabbi Google, and you can Google it yourself, and maybe the Johannesburg Google the same. Rabbi Google said, love is three things, three examples Rabbi Google gives. Example number one, I have it right here in front of me. Example number one is an intense feeling of deep affection, like babies full parents with feelings of love. Rabbi Google says number two, a great interest and pleasure in something. He loves football. That's why I said maybe the Google in Johannesburg is different. And number three, feel a deep romantic attachment to somebody like, do you love me? So I explained last night that like the first example, an intense feeling of love that parents feel for a child. So, I have triplets, as all of you know. And thank God we have 8 children. But I can promise you that you don't love my triplets. You may like them. You may appreciate watching a nice video of them for a couple of minutes, but I promise you don't love them. And I think I told the story in South Africa. Maybe I think it was a Sydenham shul when I was in South Africa now. The last trip I made was the Shabbos before Corona hit the whole world. Our whole family came for Esti Stern's bar mitzvah. So on the plane for 15 hours with 8 kids, we were the last to board. As we boarded the plane, everybody's smiling at us. Oh my God, those triplets, they're so cute. Oh my God, adorable little monsters. I wish I had these triplets. The whole plane was telling us. Everybody was talking to us. They were the talk of the entire plane. After 15 hours of non-stop crying on that plane, there wasn't one person on talking terms with us anymore. The stewardesses, those beautiful stewardesses at the end of the flight, they stand at the exit as you leave and they say, so nice to see you. It was such a pleasure. Hope to see you again soon. When we left, not one of those beautiful South African stewardesses gave us a hope to see you soon sign. Not one. The lady behind me, God bless her, she was such a good friend of mine for the first 5 minutes of the flight. In the middle of the night at 2 a.m., I saw her, she fell asleep with her fingers in her ears, trying to scream out the screams. So Why do I love my children? Because they are mine. That's why I have a deep affection for mine. But if they are not yours, you won't love them. The same thing with the second analogy that Google gives about football, right? So I told my community last night in Manhattan, I said, I grew up in South Africa. By the way, I always say it, I'm very proud of it. I'm the only Zimbabwean-born Chabad rabbi alive in the entire universe. The only one. There isn't a single other Zimbabwean-born African-American Chabad rabbi in the entire world. I've searched the world, there isn't any. So it says there he loves football. So I explained to my community, I don't love football. If you put me in front of a Giants and a Mets game, you give me front row seats, it's torture for me because I grew up with Kepta Vessels and Hansi Kronia, with cricket and rugby, man. That's what I love. I don't love football. So by the way, Americans called football the World Cup. And I once asked an American, like, I don't understand, football is not played by South Africa, Australia doesn't play football, Europe doesn't play, Asia doesn't play football. Americans consider football the World Cup. That's what they say. Because all the states play football, they consider it football. But why do they love it so much? Because it's theirs. They consider this mine, therefore I love it. So I explain the same thing with love. You know, when Tevye, the scholar Tevye, asks his wife Golda, do you love me? She answers a very profound answer, an intense answer. The philosopher Golda says, she says, do you love me? Like, first she doesn't want to answer the question. She doesn't even understand the question. But then she says, do you love me? She says like this, for 25 years, I've washed your clothes, ironed your shirts, milked your cow, fed you, did everything for you. Of course, if that's not love, what is, right? If that is not love, what is? What is she saying? She's saying, to say I love you is great, but to say I am yours with every fiber of my being is much more powerful. Automatically, I have a passionate love for you. I am yours, so of course I love you. That's what Golda was saying. And that is the answer why I love my wife and I don't love every other woman in the world, because my wife is mine. Football is mine. The baby, the child is mine, therefore I love them. So what does God say? God says the Kohen, the Jews are mine, I love them all. But here's the thing about the Kohen, which was handicapped. You see, Jews are divided into two types. One is this naturally spiritual type, which love God, and they love holiness, and they love coming to the temple. And the other type are Jews that need to be inspired. They are, so to speak, outside the temple. So God says, I'm going to choose two Kohanim. One Kohen who's not blemished. I'm going to choose you to offer sacrifices and inspire the inspired Jews. But the other Kohen, the one who's handicapped, the one who's challenged, the one who understands Jews who are spiritually not in tune with God, his job is to go outside the temple and inspire those Jews. In other words, I'm choosing the handicapped Kohen to inspire the handicapped Jew. The Jew who is far removed from Yiddishkeit. The Jew who doesn't want to come to shul. Why? Because he's got a faribel. The Jew who 30 years ago, somebody told him at the Kiddush that the herring is not for you. So he has a faribel for the last 30 years. Who should inspire him? Somebody who understands him. Who understands him? A Kohen who's handicapped. Why a Kohen who's handicapped? Because he sees himself. He thinks that he's not normal, whatever. He was chosen for this mission. It's like the Rebbe always used to say about wounded soldiers. The Rebbe used to say, don't call wounded IDF soldiers wounded. They were chosen for a specific mission. They're not wounded. They're not handicapped. You should call them Metsuyanei Tzahal. Metsuyanei means special soldiers. He says regular people have a regular mission, but Metsuyanei Tzahal have a specific mission, which is their mission. You know, I'm sure most of you watched the movie Best of Men about Ludwig Luttmann, German professor. He was, I think, a brain surgeon, and he came to England after the war. Until about 1946, anybody who was a paraplegic was basically given morphine, given drugs, and left to die. There was no value, no intrinsic value of somebody who was a paraplegic. He couldn't figure out what until Dr. Ludwig Guttmann came. And the nurses and the doctors and every single person in the 1940s fought him, and they said, give up on these paraplegics. They're not worth anything. Don't do anything with them. Who needs them? And he slowly turned them back to life. And he said, you also have a mission. You could also accomplish something. You could also do something in the world. Slowly but surely, he brought them back to life. And he was the one who formed the paraplegic Olympics, which is parallel to the big Olympics. He was the one who did it. And when one of his doctors told him give up on them, he said, "These are the best of men." And that's why the name of the movie is Best of Men, because he was the one who brought this whole idea into it. And as you know, we have this Belevachad thing, which is wounded IDF soldiers. So just dealing for the last 10 years with wounded soldiers, I can tell you from personal experience that I see how special these people are. They are very, very special people. Just want to share, if I have time, I'll share with you one story. Well, what time do we end here, by the way? Do we end like...
Whenever you feel like we are...
Oh, there's nowhere to run. Everybody's in isolation. Everybody's, nowhere to run, right? Yeah, I mean, my next thing is a Zoom, and then another Zoom, and another Zoom. So I'm not running anywhere. My kids are home. I'm in my man cave. I have my wife. She's upstairs with the kids. I'm in my man cave. So the longer I stay here, the longer I'm away from the balagan upstairs. That's fine. So anyways, I want to share with you, there was one soldier. His name is Yarin. And Yarin came to Manhattan in 2015. And Yarin is a soldier he was the first one injured in the 2015 he came in 2017, but he was the first one injured in 2015 in the wave of terror. There was Operation Protective Edge in 2014, and after that war ended, because of the 3 teenagers who were kidnapped, after that war ended, so there was another operation, another a wave of terror attacks in 2015. So Yarin was a lieutenant in one of the brigades, and he was standing with his fellow soldiers, and a terrorist came and rammed his car into these soldiers at like 70 miles an hour, and Yarin was injured pretty badly, thrown like a couple feet away, and the terrorist went out the car with an axe, and he wanted basically to finish off Yarin. And as he's about to kill him, God forbid, one of his fellow officers shot the terrorist, neutralized him. By the way, in Israel, when you see the word neutralized, doesn't mean killed. It means neutralized means, this terrorist actually went on to live. And in court, when faced with an Israeli judge who asked him why he did it, he said, "Oh, I didn't take my sugar that day, and therefore I went a little bit sugar." That's the kind of excuse that he gave. But anyway, Yarin came on a trip to Manhattan, and we took them to the greatest places there is to see in Manhattan. Now, by the way, the whole Belevachada's trips are shut down for now. Hopefully they'll reopen soon. But we took them to see the Empire State and Ground Zero and Broadway shows and helicopter rides and plane rides, whatever there is to see of Manhattan. Beautiful, beautiful Manhattan. And one of the places we took them was to see the Ohel. The Ohel is the Lubavitcher Rebbe's gravesite. And the soldiers always ask for it. It's very therapeutic. They go write a letter to the Rebbe, and they tear it, and they read it, and they praise it. It's very, very therapeutic. So after Yarin went out of the Ohel of the Rebbe's grave, I asked him, what did you pray for? No, I want to know, what did you pray for? So I was sure he would say, I prayed for a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery from his wounds, basically. His head was injured so badly. He suffers pain 24/7. There's nothing he can do to calm down the pain. His legs were battered, his arms, his ribs, every bone in his body was shattered. He's very, very wounded. Very, very, very wounded. His mind, whatever you think of, he's very wounded. So I thought he'd pray, ask the Rebbe for a blessing to pray for him for a refuah shlema, for his family, for his children, to get married, something like that. So he said to me something which astounded me, which made me realize how special a wounded soldier is. He said, I prayed that I should be chazak in Torah and mitzvot, that I should be strong in Torah and mitzvot. And I was blown away. Here he could have prayed for anything, for refuah shlema. What does he pray for? That I should be strong in Torah and mitzvot. So I asked him, did the prayer work? So he said, since his injury, he wasn't able to keep Shabbat. He wasn't able to bring himself, even though he grew up religious, to keep Shabbat, because he says, I don't know, the God who did this to me, it's very, 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 very hard. So he said, the first Shabbat after his injury that he kept was in Manhattan. In Manhattan, he kept Shabbat 100%. He said, the blessing worked. I was able to keep Shabbat. And I said to him, the Rebbe one time cried at the Fabrengen, at a talk of the Rebbe. At a talk of the Rebbe cried. The Rebbe said he received the letter from a Jew in Russia. And, during Russia, to send a letter to the Rebbe, they had to use a code word, Dear Zaidi. They used to call the Rebbe Zaidi. It was very hard to get a letter out of Russia to New York in 770. And the Rebbe said, I received a letter, and I thought that I would receive a letter from this guy, this kid, this 16-year-old child, who would pray for an exit visa, who would pray for food, who would pray for normal comforts. And what does he pray for? The Rebbe cried when he said this. The Rebbe said he prayed that I should be able to daven without machshavot zarot, without evil thoughts, with my train of thought, with being able to concentrate. And I was crying. This is what he prayed for. So inspirational. So when we see a wounded soldier, we don't call him wounded. We don't call her wounded. We call them special, because that's what they are. So a Kohen who was wounded, who was handicapped in any way, who had a deficiency, was a special Kohen chosen by God for a specific mission. Right? This is what he has. He's chosen by God for a specific mission. Taking this back to today, to today's coronavirus era. So we look back, and like I mentioned before, we have 87 mitzvot that we could do today, not more than 87. And even these 87 mitzvot, many of them are challenged specifically with shul. I mean, mikvahs are closed. It's challenging. It's very hard. So what we need to do is, we need to realize that this is all from God. God chose us for this mission. God put this situation. And if God put this situation, it also means he gives us the strength to persevere, to overcome this, to come out of it much stronger. And I just want to end off with one final story. Beautiful story that I just heard recently. There's a rabbi in Crown Heights. He's the chief. He's one of the 3 leading rabbis in Brooklyn, New York. He actually just passed away from the coronavirus. So may his soul have an aliyah. But in 1944, his mother, Bunya Shway, she lost her husband to hunger. In Russia, they're very, very hungry. And she was left alone with her 3 little boys, Baruch, Shalom, Isaac, and Yankel. 3 little boys. So the father was a Torah scholar, and she wanted her children to learn Torah, to appreciate the Torah. So she sent her 2 older children to a place called Samarkand in Uzbekistan. It was far, far, far away. But she knew that her husband had friends, and there was a yeshiva, some sort of yeshiva, and some sort of education. So she sent her 2 older children there. Now her younger child, Yankel, she didn't want to send there because he's too young. But after a couple of, like a year or 2, or a couple of months even, she realized that she can't educate this child, Yankel. So she told her child, I'm going to send you with another person to go to Samarkand to join your brothers. And the child said, I love you, mother. Please don't send me. I want to stay here. Please don't send me. And she said, she looked him in the eye and she said, I promise you, as soon as I can, I will come to Samarkand to see you. So she sent her child off. She embraced him. She hugged him. She gave him some nash, some food, and he went off on the train. Anyway, a couple of months later, this Rebbetzin Shway was able to leave the city where she was, and she's able to travel take a train and travel to Uzbekistan, to Samarkand, thousands of miles away. And at the train station, when she comes there, who does she see? She sees her 8-year-old child, Yankele. So she embraces him, and she hugs him, and he hugs her, and they're crying and tearing, and he doesn't want to leave her. And his mother looks at him and she says, I don't understand. How did you know I was coming today? There was no Instagram, no Facebook, no WhatsApp. How did you know I was coming today? So he looked at her and he says, Mame, du hast gesagt, als du wirst kommen. Mother, he says, you promised me that you will come to see me. So each and every day I come to the train station to see if you've arrived. And the point of the story is like this. God told us, I will come. I will come to see you. God tells us, I will come. I won't abandon you. I will come. Mashiach is coming soon. So every single day we read, Ani ma'amin b'emunah shlema b'viyat HaMashiach ve'af al pi she'yitmameh, even though he may tarry, im kol zeh, nevertheless, achakelo, I wait for him, b'chol yom she'yavo, every single day that he may come. May God help that today will be the day Mashiach will come. I'm going to unmute everybody. So whoever wants can ask questions and we can have a discussion here.